I definitely agree that we get allies by reaching out to other communities. Sometimes when you're queer, you are so focused on the oppression you're facing, and you don't are sometimes blinded by other oppression or unable to see other oppressions. So I think because I have different identities, not just gay, but also an immigrant, going through that process of getting a green card, Latino, going through that process of growing up Catholic and dealing with family. And so I think that sometimes when you're only one identity, and it's sometimes you don't notice other identities and aren't able to comprehend and support each other. And that's what I really want to help connect, show people that there are intersections.
I mean, being gay is one thing, but I think there's still strong cultural ties that exist for people around race and ethnicity and culture and religion that are outside of sexuality or have implications on our sexuality too.
You know, you think about, for example, Baynard Rustin, right? Now becoming more and more celebrated and recognized for his contributions. But if we wanted to sort of take notice of that particular individual's significance within the civil rights movement, I think as a community, we should be proud of him, not just as people of color, but again, as a queer community, that we could have someone be so self-sacrificing, right, to put himself at the heart of a movement that was still unwilling to accept him for who he was. But also, I think what Baynard Rustin also did was something that I'm very proud of, and that is he showed us another way to be a man. And I'm going to use masculinity because I think it speaks to me as something that I'm proud of about the gay community, is that it does give us a sort of plethora of forms of gendering and doing gender that I think are very healthy in some cases. I think we have an ability to sit with women, children, and be nurturing as gay men, and that is something we don't celebrate enough of. And also our humanity to be able to deal with crises.
We're coming away from the notion of just being a fringe, group of people that are on the outcast, and we're very integrated into society now, and we're continuing to pioneer areas that otherwise just 20 years ago would not have happened. I mean, my sitting at Home Depot 20 years ago, I'm not sure it would have happened. 30, almost 25 years ago, when I came out in the Midwest, there were no opportunities for trans people at all. There was, unless you were 100% passable, at that point in time, you were pretty much stuck performing or prostituting or selling drugs or whatever else it was.
I think there's a lot more work to be done in learning about queer history and the younger generations. Unfortunately, it's not taught in schools, which doesn't make sense because it's history of the nation. We should be teaching in schools. I feel like a lot of us have to, on our own, look it up, and it's difficult, I think.
And I think Milk is a good example of how it reminds us of, how there was a very deliberate and well-organized move to go state by state, to not only, deny gay individuals the right to marry and certain other civil rights, but to almost be somewhat hostile in those states and create a culture of animosity and just backlash that turned into violence in some cases also job security. I mean, Milk does a great job of reminding us of that. And I think it had to come, unfortunately, through a Hollywood film and not through the sort of oral narratives and the oral stories of our elders within the movement, organizations within the movement who we've entrusted with, the sort of helm of leading us and taking us forward. For me, the tragedy is that even for other movements, it seems like it has to sort of come to us through these extremely mediated forms that are often detached, right? We are being told our narratives and our stories and our history through film, maybe through other art form, but not through the voices of those who were part of the movement or those who are trying to assume the leadership within the movement. And I think that goes back now to mentorship. I think the reason that is the case is because we have not done a good job of mentoring each other. And I think part of that is because some of us have not been well mentored ourselves. I think even our elders who may have been part of Stonewall and who may have been part of other movements, not only have they lost sight, I think, of the issue and maybe the bigger picture, but I think they've been so damaged in some ways that they need a rest, they need a break. And that break, unfortunately, has been maybe 20, 30 years, and there's been no sense of getting back to it, right? Getting back into the fight. And I know that language of fight and always being on the sort of combative note is tiring, it's exhausting, and we want to feel like we've arrived at some place. But I think it's okay to sort of assume not just a defensive posturing, but I think as a movement, as a community, we should be in a state of readiness. And that is something I don't notice. I think we're often too reactionary, even with Prop 8. I think some of us, we came to this after the sort of damage has been done, when history would tell us that for every gain the movement has made, there's always been a backlash, a counter movement, a counter revolution. And that's where history should come in as well as our mentorship.
Although I feel like I was mentored and supported, I feel like there isn't that much going on for young folks who are queer. I feel like sometimes once you pass that 21 age, all of a sudden you have this new world. You can go to the bars now, you can go to clubbing, you can go wherever, you can do so much more things. There's so much more to do when you're plus 21, and then you kind of forget all those struggles you went through when you were younger. I see that over and over, people who were involved and then they age out, you could say, and then kind of aren't so much as supportive as they used to be. So I think something that would be helpful would have older folks to have more all ages events. You know, we're so concentrated on making our money off alcohol. We then exclude anybody who's younger and can't come in.
I love having younger people who are friends who keep me more young than my middle age. And I would actually say sort of the same thing about the community. I think, you know, youthful enthusiasm and vigor and excitement and sometimes awe is such a good thing because it counterbalances in the community a more learned, sort of wise, been around the block, sometimes perhaps even jaded, depending on which block you've been around, approach. I just think, again, it's kind of where we started. I think there's not only room for all of that, I think it's important.